What would you do if, while walking down a quiet road on a sunny afternoon, you stumbled upon an abandoned boy weeping inconsolably? Imagine the questions spiraling through your mind. Who is he? Where is his family? Are we living in a world that has forgotten the innocence of childhood? Today, we take a journey through a seemingly ordinary day that transformed into a profound revelation, one that shocked a community and left a lasting impact on everyone involved. Picture this: a small town in the heart of America, just on the edge of a sprawling forest, a place where the laughter of children fills the air, where neighbors know each other by name, and where secrets linger like shadows at dusk. It's here, among the rustling leaves and sun-drenched pathways, that our story begins. One fateful afternoon, a rabbit darted across the road, its fluffy tail bobbing in the sunlight. It was a simple event, charming even, until the world shifted in an instant. As our curious rabbit scurried away, a young boy, no older than 8, came into view. He sat on the pavement, knees drawn against his chest, tears streaming down his face. A sight so jarring that it repelled all at once the beauty of the day. His clothes were ragged, and his fingers were dirt-streaked. It's alarming, isn't it? The stark juxtaposition of childhood joy and despair laid bare before you. The moment bore a strange weight, a resonance that unearthed both compassion and confusion. But let's pause a moment. Why was the boy there? Why was he crying? These questions aren't just a narrative device. They reflect something more profound about human nature. According to social psychology, we are wired for empathy. Communities thrive on connection, understanding, and shared stories. That boy, abandoned but not lost, became a mirror, reflecting a collective consciousness, and his absence felt like a wound. When people driving by began to notice, a ripple of concern spread like wildfire. The rabbit, oblivious to the unfolding drama, continued its frolicking, while the frantic questions amplified. A concerned passerby pulled over. In a split second, the instinct to help versus the fear of intervening ignited a battle within the hearts of those who witnessed this haunting tableau. Urban legends whisper tales of altruism, how heroes are forged in the heat of crisis. But here, watching from behind the tinted windows of their vehicles, many wrestled with a psychological phenomenon known as the bystander effect. The scene was captivating yet unsettling. The more people who arrived, the less likely individuals were to intervene. Isn't that a perplexing truth? When faced with a crisis, it seems paradoxically that an increase in witnesses can lead to a decrease in personal responsibility to act. But then came Marianne. A small, self-described ordinary woman in her mid-50s, she couldn't bear to drive past. Stepping out of her car, she took a calculated risk. As she approached the boy, the world around her tilted slightly. The collective energy of the crowd urged in two directions. Some murmured words of encouragement for her boldness, while others shot glances of disapproval, a silent judgment on the risks they were both about to take. Marianne knelt beside him. "Hey there, sweetie," she asked gently, her tone soft but unwavering. In that simple question lay a powerful truth, the art of reaching out, of taking a moment to connect. It's tangible evidence of our innate desire to comfort, to understand, and to heal. Social scientists have long examined this interplay. In a study by researchers at Carnegie Mellon, it was revealed that compassionate actions can create waves of positive emotions in both the giver and receiver. The boy looked up, his tear-stained cheeks glistening as he choked on his words. I got lost," he muttered, his voice breaking. Suddenly, the fabric of reality unraveled around them. It wasn't just a boy on the street. It was a life filled with fear, loneliness, and longing for the safety of home. When we hear lost, we often assign it to a map or a place, but what if lost were also a feeling, a psychological state that digs deeper than mere geography? Marianne's presence became a lifesaver, not just in that moment, but as a critical point of contact. She was not only comforting a child, she symbolized a beacon of hope against the dark clouds of despair. In the world of psychology, we find the concept of attachment theory, which outlines how strong emotional bonds, especially in childhood, can significantly influence one's stability and resilience throughout life. The gentle pat on the back, the reassuring smile, it all plays a role. This little exchange in the midst of chaos became a lifeline, strongly reminding us of the foundational importance of human connection. Other onlookers, inspired by this act of courage, began to step forward. The name echoed against the weary asphalt, wrapping itself around the fabric of the moment. This wasn't just some random child. This was a community member in distress. As Jacob turned toward Henry, an air of understanding settled over the onlookers. Personal histories began to surge forward, intertwined stories and connections that had been gently forgotten amidst the mundanity of daily life. They began to piecemeal his identity back together. Who he was, where he belonged, was being restored within the hearts of those who cared enough to stand witness. It's a testament to the power of community, and how, when we come together, we create a force so strong that it can even outweigh despair. Yet, even with this beam of light, the darkness loomed close. You could feel the trembling uncertainty, like electricity crackling in the air. Had Jacob wandered too far? Had he fallen through cracks too deep? As Henry knelt next to Jacob, the juxtaposition of the profound with the mundane was striking. Stirring in his small frame, Jacob hesitated. Silence danced momentarily around them, capturing breaths from the crowd as they awaited an answer. Time felt suspended, stretched like the last rays of dusk before twilight. When he finally spoke, it was a whisper. A chill cascaded through the group, stirring a collective empathy, a wave of understanding woven together like the threads of a tapestry, each strand representing a story of struggle, and each struggle an acknowledgement of the fragility of childhood. Research indicates that exposure to parental conflict can significantly destabilize children's emotional well-being. This boy, who had only meant to escape discord, found himself lost on a road full of strangers who were starting to piece together his heart's weight. As the emotions mounted, something unexpected happened. A woman with a warm smile, someone everyone in town knew but had never spoken to, stepped forward. Her name was Lisa, a childhood friend of Jacob's mother. "Honey, you know it's not safe to run away when things get tough," she said, crouching down to meet his eyes. In just a few words, she acted as a bridge, not only for Jacob, but for the lost fragments in that moment amongst the crowd. It was as if each person present was transformed into a guardian, their compassion a gentle salve for his wounds, rising in a tide beneath the murky weight of shared uncertainty. But just as hope flickered to life amidst despair, reality slithered back in, with the sound of police sirens approaching. A strange mix of comfort and anxiety set in. A relief that help was on the way, yet a tightening grip of fear about what that might mean for Jacob. They had built this protective cocoon, a gestation of love and understanding, and the intrusion of authority cracked that fragile shell. As the emergency vehicles pulled onto the scene, the crowd watched, breath bated, each face painted with its own tapestry of emotion, some relief, some fear, some judgment, and some outright anger. Had they done enough? Would he be taken away? Would he remember their faces? In this moment of existential angst, it was impossible to ignore the weight of societal expectations. The psychological concept of the social contract echoed through the air. Were they simply supposed to let authorities handle it now? What if we had overstepped? But before they could get lost in that cycle of thought, something amazing happened. Jacob's tiny voice broke through the tension as he called out to Marion and Henry. "Wait." At the edge of expectation, we, the audience, find ourselves caught in a space between hope and dread. What does this act of gratitude mean? Are we watching the dawn of a new path laid before a young boy? Or are we standing witness to the shattering of innocence, where the horrors of the adult world begin to seep into the purity of childhood? The sirens wailed a haunting tune, but the boy's gratitude cut through the noise, intertwining lives and fates in a tapestry yet unwoven. The answers were as elusive as shadows, lingering just out of reach, leaving us perched at the intersection of heartbreak and healing, waiting for the truths that still lay ahead. What would compel a rabbit darting across a quiet road to suddenly become the spark of something extraordinary? And what about a boy sitting alone by the curb, tears streaming down his face, echoes of sorrow disrupting the otherwise peaceful afternoon. It's a scene so stark, so haunting, it begs a deeper inquiry into our collective humanity. What happens next will shock you and might just alter your understanding of compassion forever. On a sleepy Sunday afternoon, when time seemed to stretch languorously, a small town came alive in an ordinary way. As the sun hung high, casting a golden hue over everything, a fleeting moment caused ripples that would resonate long after the shadows faded. Picture this: vibrant tree leaves whispering in the wind, neighbors waving as they pass by, and children's laughter ringing out in the distance. But in this serene tableau, a mass of emotions began to unfold, a juxtaposition so sharp it could carve into the very fabric of hope. A rabbit, inquisitive and unburdened, hopped across the asphalt with such carefree grace that you might think it held the key to joy itself. But as the lush green of the forest melted into the gray of the road, something marred that idyllic scene: a young boy sitting forlornly on the side of the pavement, cradling his knees to his chest, drowning in his own sobs. The cold, hard surface seemed to reflect the aching isolation that had wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket. This wasn't just a boy in distress, but rather a symbol of lost innocence, a son of society, yearning for connection amid chaos. At that moment, the ordinary blinked into the extraordinary. The rabbit stopped, hesitated, and then scampered into the underbrush, as if sensing the weight of this unseen despair. It's fascinating how animals can be so intuitively aware of human emotion. In studies of animal behavior, researchers have found that many species, particularly those domesticated or frequently in contact with humans, pick up on our emotional states, acting as mirrors to our feelings. Perhaps this rabbit, in its small and instinctive way, recognized the profound sorrow that lingered just a breath away. As if triggered by that moment, cars began to slow down, curious to observe this haunting tableau. Each vehicle held a mix of feelings: confusion, concern, and even a reluctant compulsion to turn away. Strangers exchanged glances, a silent question hanging in the air: who would be the first to act? The bystander effect kicked in, a psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to offer help in an emergency when others are present. Such a tragic irony. A crowd gathered, yet the weight of action felt heavier than the boy's tears. But then, like a beacon piercing through the fog of uncertainty, a woman named Clara pulled over. She wasn't anyone extraordinary, just an average citizen on her way home from grocery shopping. Yet courage often wears the face of the unremarkable. Stepping out of her car, she walked toward the boy with an urgency that radiated warmth. "Hey, little one, it's okay. You're not alone," she called, gently emphasizing connection. Those words, simple yet potent, held a significance that lingered far beyond that moment. Clara knelt beside him, the weight of the world falling briefly from her shoulders as she focused entirely on the boy. The act of reaching out, of acknowledging another's pain, this is the bedrock of human empathy. Studies show that recognizing suffering in others activates the same areas of the brain associated with experiencing pain ourselves. It's as if we are biologically wired to feel for one another. Clara asked, her voice steady yet soft, a contrast to the tremors of his sobs. The boy looked up, his small frame trembling with the weight of his unshed emotions, and muttered a heartbreaking response: "They were fighting." In that single sentence, the boy peeled back layers of societal complexity: the struggles of family, the terrors of childhood, the instinct to flee from discomfort. The outer world blurred as Clara cupped her hands around his, grounding him in the present moment while chaos swirled just beneath the surface. This connection wasn't just a lifeline for Jacob, it became a testament to resilience and the healing powers that emerge when we confront our vulnerabilities. Surrounding civilians, captivated by their exchange, began to step forward. It was as if Clara's courageous act became a catalyst, igniting a dormant fire within the hearts of those who had been watching from behind the tinted glass of their cars. A woman named Elaine, who commonly volunteered at the local shelter, approached with a snack in her hand. She offered gently. The boy nodded, and as the rich treat melted on his tongue, a little color returned to his cheeks. This gesture, so small and seemingly inconsequential, echoed a vital truth. When we uplift one another, we weave threads that create a tapestry of community. Social psychology teaches us about the power of small acts. Studies have consistently shown that kindness can enhance our mood, reduce stress, and even improve physical health. As the crowd gathered closer, each person brought fragments of their own stories. A retired teacher knelt beside Jacob, recalling his own childhood moments fraught with loneliness and relating them to the boy's current plight. "You're not alone in this, kiddo. We've all been there. You have a whole group of people here who care," he said with a nostalgic shimmer in his eyes. This gathering of strangers took on a life of its own, morphing into a supportive family in an instant. Bound by shared humanity, a band of emotionally invested bystanders began to coalesce. But just as the warmth formed yet another layer of protection around the boy, another creasing, disquieting reality pierced the moment, the unmistakable sound of sirens slicing through the air. As the flashing lights approached, a wave of mixed emotions rippled through the crowd. Relief that professional help was on the way mingled uncomfortably with a palpable sense of dread. What would happen now? Would they pull Jacob away, whisk him off to an unfamiliar environment? Would this moment of fragility dissolve into a whirlwind of authority and procedure, stripping away the precious connections that had formed? The boy glanced up at Clara with those wide, tear-streaked eyes, a silent plea communicating everything words could not express. At that moment, he was desperate. Desperate for connection, understanding, perhaps even love. Isn't it curious how the instinct to seek solace often coincides with fear of being truly known? Clara could feel the anguish pulsating in the air, a tangible echo reminding her that this was far more than a singular event. It was a pivotal moment in a young boy's life, and ripples would cascade outward, affecting all of them. Then, with a focus that could cut through noise, Clara held Jacob's gaze. "It's okay to feel scared, but we're here for you. I promise," she said, her tone soothing, wrapping him in a verbal embrace. It's astounding how words can carry the weight of 1,000 affirmations. Studies have shown that positive affirmations can significantly boost one's self-esteem, reassuring individuals that they are seen and valued. Witnessing that moment, you begin to understand how deeply meaningful human connection can be. As the patrol car pulled up, 2 officers emerged, concern etched on their faces. They approached the group, but it was Clara who took the first step forward. "He's okay," she reassured them, a protective instinct surging within her. Amidst the authoritative questions, a tension began to bubble beneath the surface. The uniformed officers exchanged glances, measuring sympathy with duty, uncertainty with experience. Jacob shrank back for a moment, his heart beating like a war drum. Would he have to go home now? The thought of returning to the chaos and conflict he'd fled gripped him with a vice of fear. In this pivotal moment, the reality of childhood trauma loomed like a specter, reminding everyone present of the fragility of innocence. Research shows how emotional upheaval in the home can shape a child's psyche in lasting ways, planting seeds of anxiety far beyond their years. With the small-town boys and girls of that community, witnessing this newfound bond between Clara and Jacob, recognize their own fleeting sparks of innocence? Or would they merely become spectators in a drama that now felt far too personal? The crowd, usually a passive collection of faces, seemed to breathe as one. Compassion radiated around them, a defiant stance against despair. Women whispered reassurances to one another. Men exchanged nods of understanding. Collective strength became the bedrock upon which they stood, refusing to let an abandoned boy slip back into the shadows, back into a life that felt so cold and devoid of comfort. As the officers began to have a word with Jacob, Clara reassured him with a nod, directly imploring the young boy to express his own truth. "Tell them how you're feeling," she urged, bringing her hands gently to his shoulders. It was a quiet invitation, one that could free him from the constricting chains of shame and fear that had been wrapped around him ever since he'd run away. Drawing a deep breath, Jacob looked up at the officers, his resolve returning ever so slightly. "I don't want to go home," he whispered, the honesty of his words hanging heavy in the air. You could see the effect of his confession ripple through the gathered crowd. The air became thick with empathy and understanding. No longer was this just a problem to solve. It was a soul laid bare, raw and vulnerable. And in that moment, each observer was faced with an uncomfortable reality. How easily society can overlook such deep pain when nestled within the familiar confines of expectation. But the sirens had already sung their accusatory song, and the officers, though sympathetic, were bound by duty. Pressure mounted as their expressions hardened, the nebulous lines between protection and authority blurring into an image of uncertainty. Would they abide by Jacob's plea, or enforce a sense of order that felt palpable in the crawling silence? As that tension reached its peak, a glimmer of hope sparked from the crowd. A young girl named Sophie, no more than 12 years old, stepped forward, her voice ringing like a chime in the silence. "He just needs to feel safe." Her innocent yet powerful statement cut through the noise of adult worries, a reminder that perhaps children understand far more than we give them credit for. And it was in this charged tableau, this intersection of pain, courage, frustration, and compassion, that the world resonated with questions still unanswered. The promise of connection flickered amidst the uncertainty, leaving every onlooker caught at the crossroads of healing and heartache, waiting for a final decision that could transform the lives of everyone involved. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the scene, you could feel that everything hung delicately in the balance, a fragile moment poised between innocence and the bitterness of experience, the kind of tension that speaks to the deepest corners of our collective psyche. What would happen next echoed in the silence, shrouded in uncertainty and urgency. Would they be able to find a way to keep Jacob from slipping back into a world that had forgotten how to protect its young? Or would this fleeting moment of human connection dissolve back into the anonymity of a crowd? As you dive deeper into this moving narrative, ask yourself, how far would you go to ensure the safety of someone who needed you? The rabbit had already disappeared into the thicket, leaving behind a strange yet meaningful legacy. But its symbolism lingered, a reminder that sometimes even the smallest creatures can ignite a spark powerful enough to change lives forever. The story was far from over, and little did they know, the most shocking revelations were still waiting to unfold. What happens when innocence meets neglect? When the unassuming tranquility of a sunny afternoon is shattered by the piercing scream of a child in distress. Imagine this vivid tableau. A rabbit hopping along the roadside, blissfully unaware, suddenly spotting an abandoned boy, tears cascading down his cheeks like a relentless waterfall of sorrow. The moment is jarring, reflective of a deeper societal issue. What unfolds next will leave you questioning our very capacity for empathy and connection. In a small town, nestled among the rustling trees and distant laughter, this story begins. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers and the promise of a lazy weekend. Children laughed and played, their gleeful voices punctuating the calm. But in a secluded corner on the side of an untraveled road, a quiet storm brewed. The peace that enveloped the town belied the tumult coursing through young Jacob, an 8-year-old boy whose world had splintered into shards of confusion and fear. As the rabbit darted by, a quaint reminder of childhood's playful spirit, it stopped short, its little ears twitching in alarm. Across the street, silhouetted against the backdrop of pastoral serenity, Jacob sat on the asphalt, knees drawn tightly to his chest, tears streaming down his dirty cheeks. He looked like a lost soul in the wilderness, disconnected from the world around him. That rabbit, a symbol of purity, was the first to bear witness to his deep-seated despair, urging onlookers to pause and realize that this was much more than just a flickering moment. Yet the world often spins on, impatient with emotion and reluctant to engage with raw vulnerability. As cars whizzed by, some drivers cast concerned glances, while others turned away, their minds preoccupied with the day's mundanities. It's a phenomenon psychologists call the bystander effect, where the presence of others inhibits an individual's willingness to help. The more people who witness a crisis, the less likely any one of them will take action. A heart-wrenching irony played out before us. A child in distress, surrounded by a community, yet feeling utterly isolated. Then, like a lighthouse illuminating the darkest night, a woman named Clara pulled over. Her car was packed with groceries, yet she sensed instinctively that the gay had birthed a profound emergency. With a determined heart, she stepped out, her mind racing. What words could bridge the chasm of fear that engulfed Jacob? "Hey there, sweetheart. Her voice flowed like a warm stream, cutting through the icy silence that enveloped the boy. In that moment, the rest of the world fell away. Jacob looked up, his tear-filled eyes meeting Clara's unwavering gaze. "I ran away," he confessed, his voice trembling, unraveling in the space between them. The confession hung in the air, palpable and heavy, a reflection of a child's desire to escape the cacophony of conflict he could no longer endure. This simple exchange blossomed with significance. Clara's quest for understanding was driven by empathy, that remarkable human capacity to feel and resonate with another's plight. Studies show that empathy activates the same areas of the brain that are involved in experiencing physical pain. In this moment, Clara wasn't just a woman trying to console a crying boy. She embodied the psychological principle of altruism, stepping beyond herself to recognize the suffering of another. Just as Clara began to build that bridge of solidarity, other onlookers approached, drawn into the scene like moths to a flame. One woman, Elaine, who had volunteered in shelters, joined them, bringing a snack, an overture of kindness, she asked, offering it to Jacob with a genuine warmth that seemed to already fill the cracks of his shattered spirit. The act of offering something as simple as a piece of chocolate can evoke feelings of safety, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can echo through a child's heart. Social psychologists have noted that these gestures tap into our fundamental need for love and security. When Elaine's words reached him, it transformed something dark into the possibility of light. Jacob accepted the chocolate, a tentative smile breaking through his tears, illuminating the haunting shadows that had clouded his young face. As the gathering continued, a man named Robert, known for his gruff demeanor, stepped forward. Deep down, he recalled his own childhood feelings of abandonment. "You know, kid, everyone here has faced their own battles. You're not alone," he said, his rough voice filled with unexpected gentleness, as if he was offering more than just words. He was extending an olive branch forged from shared struggle. It was in this moment of collective humanity that something remarkable began to unfold. The convergence of strangers, previously bound by social anonymity, represented an unspoken promise of connection. The boy, once isolated, now found himself cocooned in warmth and solidarity. This sense of community is vital. Social psychology suggests that belongingness, feeling connected to others, can significantly enhance emotional well-being. But amid the blooming hope, the distance from Jacob's family still loomed large like an unhealed wound. Each word spoken brought a momentary reprieve from his pain, yet the very essence of his fears lingered just below the surface. He was scared of returning to a chaotic household where shouting echoed in the hallways like ominous ghosts. Then came a moment of clarity. Jacob released a small, shaky breath, glancing from Clara to Elaine to Robert, his vulnerability reaching its peak. "I just don't want to go home," he whispered, each word shaped by the rawness of his experiences. The collective gasp that escaped the gathering seemed to pulse through the crowd, anchoring them to the reality of his plight. Here was a child baring his soul, revealing the layers of pain that others had chosen to overlook. This simplicity, the honesty of his fear, wrapped around them like a cloak, binding their hearts in shared responsibility. But as they processed the gravity of the situation, the sounds of sirens sliced through the air like a knife, pulling the community's focus from the emergent connection back into the realm of authority. The flashing lights heralded the arrival of law enforcement, a cold reminder that sometimes help comes with a price. Fear rippled through the crowd as they noticed the uniformed officers stepping from their vehicles, their expressions a blend of concern and professional detachment. This duality of duty and empathy posed a challenge not only for the boy, but for everyone present. Could authority grasp the delicate tapestry of emotions woven around Jacob, or would they simply enforce a system designed to control rather than heal? As the officers approached, the anxiety in the air surged. Would they listen? Would they understand? Clara, sensing the escalating tension, stepped in front of Jacob, her protective instincts ignited. "He's been lost, emotionally and physically. He just needs support," she asserted, her voice firm yet compassionate. In that moment, she became his advocate, the embodiment of love and understanding amidst the cacophony of authority. It's interesting how the human psyche often retreats into fear when confronted by figures of power. But here, more than just a barrier, stood Clara. She was a living reminder of the empathy we must wield as a shield against indifference. The officers exchanged glances, processing the urgency in Clara's plea. Each look conveyed uncertainty, as if they were wrestling with a tightrope between protocol and compassion. One of the officers inquired gently, yet the question felt heavy, laden with implications. Jacob's answer hung in the air, suspended between the warmth of newfound connections and the chill of his reality. "Sometimes it hurts there," he said, the quiet admission peeling back layers of sheltered pain. Each echo of his words reverberated, like an anthem of vulnerability. The crowd was rapt, a collective heart beating together. Here was the simmering intersection of courage and fear, a moment where everything hung in delicate balance. In social psychology, there's a theory called moral obligation, which posits that individuals feel compelled to act when others are in distress. It was now palpable, electric. Every onlooker leaned in, their thoughts racing. How do we protect this boy? How do we uplift a life in the balance? As the sun began its descent, casting long, dramatic shadows over the gathered crowd, a renewed wildness took shape. Emerging from his cocoon of fear, Jacob glanced up at Clara and the others, his heart beating with the rhythm of hope. "Maybe I could talk to someone," he suggested quietly, the flicker of reaching out still dying for fuel. As the officers exchanged decisive glances, uncertainty loomed large like a storm cloud. Would they guide him toward help or sweep him into the rushed apprehensions of policy? Jacob's future, still uncharted, teetered precariously on the edge of that decision. Cascading emotions enveloped everyone present as echoes of childhood hopes and adult fears intertwined in a tangled web of vulnerability. The rabbit had already slipped away, leaving behind a scene that would forever haunt the hearts of those who dared to witness. As the tension peaked, the unfurling drama brought forth questions that lingered in the collective consciousness. How do we nurture empathy in a world so often devoid of it? How do we ensure that children like Jacob find sanctuary in connection rather than chaos? And as the crowd watched breathlessly, it became evident that no one could remain untouched by this moment. The very fabric of societal responsibility unfurled before them, challenging perceptions, dismantling insensitivity, igniting raw human emotions. Yet, just as the scene reached its climax, the officers moved closer, their decisions carefully unfolding before them. And at that very point, everything felt poised for transformation. A potential for healing flickered just out of reach, hanging in the balance like the last rays of sunlight before darkness enveloped the landscape. What would happen next in this complex web of emotion and societal expectation? Would Jacob's plea for understanding resonate deeply enough to alter the course of his fate? As hope flickered in his eyes, the future remained unwritten, and the answers hung tantalizingly in the air, waiting to unfold. What do we truly know about the hidden struggles of children? Imagine this unsettling scene. A solitary boy, abandoned on a roadside, his small frame convulsing in silent sobs, while a curious rabbit watches from a distance. This encounter wasn't just an accident of nature, it was a jarring intersection of innocence and despair. What happens next will challenge everything you thought you knew about empathy and the ties that bind us as a community. On a seemingly idyllic afternoon in a quiet town, the sun shone bright, casting long shadows across the familiar landscapes of suburban life. Laughter echoed from nearby backyards. Children ran free, their carefree antics punctuated by the occasional bark of a neighborhood dog. But in this picture-perfect moment, at the bend of a lonely road, a boy named Jacob sat isolated from the world, his small frame quivering in an emotional tempest that few could see. With his knees drawn up tightly to his chest and tears streaking down his dirt-smudged cheeks, Jacob appeared like a fragile flower caught in a harsh wind. The stark juxtaposition of this scene, against the backdrop of joy, painted a haunting picture. How could something so painful exist amidst a world that seemed so blissfully unaware? As if sensing the gravity of it all, a rabbit, with its ears perked up in curiosity, hopped cautiously across the asphalt, stopping just shy of the boy. It was like nature itself paused to witness this poignant tableau. But here's the unsettling truth. How often do we become the passerby, so caught up in our own lives that we overlook those in distress? Social psychology reveals something profoundly unsettling. The more bystanders present during an emergency, the less likely it is for anyone to intervene. Those who witnessed Jacob's tears were not simply spectators. They were wrapped in layers of societal hesitation and fear. Who would dare to step in? Who would risk embarrassment, potential judgment, or simply the discomfort of engaging? Yet, before the world stepped away, a woman named Clara emerged from the crowd, her instincts igniting a flicker of courage. A mother herself, she could not turn a blind eye. She parked her car and approached the boy, her heart racing, not just for his well-being, but driven by a profound moral obligation that any parent feels deep in their bones. "Hey there, little one," she said softly, kneeling before him, her voice weaving warmth into the chill of the moment. As Jacob's tear-filled eyes met hers, the world around them dissolved. Chaos melted away, leaving only a single thread of connection. I ran away," he stammered, the words barely escaping his lips like fragile whispers. Suddenly, the rush of the day seemed less important than the weight of his confession. There it was, the raw honesty of a child escaping a reality too heavy to bear. The moment pierced through to Clara, igniting an urgency that would shape the unfolding events. In that fragile space between them, Clara realized she was not merely offering comfort. She was stepping into dangerous territory, a space where emotional risk intertwines with altruistic duty. There's an undeniable power in empathy, a force so potent it compels us to act, to confront our own fears and biases. Studies from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology reveal how empathy can significantly enhance human connection, providing both comfort and strength to those who feel helpless. But as Clara knelt there, engaged with the boy, the cold reality still loomed heavy. What would happen to Jacob if no one intervened? Would he become just another statistic, a fleeting moment forgotten by the world around him? The warmth of her compassion kindled hope in him, yet fear gripped him tightly, as his mind raced through every terrifying scenario of being pulled back into the turmoil that awaited him at home. Sensing the gravity of the situation, other onlookers began to step forward, drawn into the orbit of Clara and Jacob's dialogue. A woman named Elaine, known in the community for her kindness, approached, carrying a small snack. She offered, her eyes sparkling with concern. Jacob hesitated, glancing nervously at Clara, who nodded encouragingly. The act of sharing something sweet, something that signifies comfort in its purity, represented a profound gesture of kindness. Much like the communal interactions seen in shared meals, Elaine's small offering bridged the emotional gap between them. Research has shown that sharing food fosters social bonds. It's an instinctive way of showing care and understanding. And even as he accepted the chocolate, Jacob felt a sense of safety washing over him, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, compassion can illuminate the path toward healing. As faces began to gather, Robert, a gruff man with a past of his own, hesitated at the margins. He often kept to himself, avoiding emotional entanglements. But witnessing the boy's raw distress awakened something deep inside him, a recognition. "I know what it's like to be scared. You're not alone, kid," he said, stepping forward despite the reservations that usually kept him at bay. His words rang with authenticity, echoing truths that many present wished to bury. The psychology of shared experience reveals that personal stories connect us, creating a tapestry of understanding that binds us even in brief encounters. In his act of vulnerability, Robert wasn't just lending support. He was showing Jacob that the world could still be a place filled with understanding, despite its rough edges. With each moment, Jacob found himself surrounded by a growing constellation of empathy, and with it, the shadows of despair began to shift. Yet just as a fragile sense of community began to form around him, the air was pierced by the sharp sound of sirens. Anxiety rippled through the crowd. The flashing blue lights approached, blurring the comfort of their gathering. The arrival of law enforcement shifted the energy dramatically. Was the sanctuary they had built around Jacob about to dissolve? Each officer stepped out, their presence both authoritative and intimidating. The very essence of childhood vulnerability felt threatened in the face of systemic intervention. Would they, too, understand the depth of anguish this boy carried, or would they translate his tears into a problem? One officer called, his tone professional yet edged with concern. As the crowd leaned in, Clara turned, a steady resolve igniting within her. "He just needs support. He was upset and ran away from home," she explained. All eyes roamed between the officers and Jacob, the silence crackling with unspoken tension. This pivotal moment cast a spotlight on societal expectations. How often do we uphold authority over emotional intelligence? The psychological phenomenon, known as the social contract, weighs heavily on this dynamic, challenging individuals to navigate between duty and compassion. Jacob met the eyes of the officers, fear swelling inside him like a tidal wave. "I don't want to go back there," he murmured, each word trembling, laden with the weight of a confession that shattered any remaining semblance of composure. The boy, once a ghost wandering in shadows, was now a bright ember, glowing amidst a gathering storm. The officers shared uncertain glances, wrestling with protocols versus the raw reality unfolding before them. Could they listen closely enough to discern the deeper nuances of Jacob's fears, or would they adhere strictly to the guidelines, potentially forcing him back into a maelstrom he desperately sought to escape? In that moment, the community held its breath as Clara's protective instinct surged forward. "It's okay to feel scared. Jacob, you're safe here," she assured him, drawing closer. The power of her reassurance was palpable, as she embodied the narrative of understanding, one that carries the promise of healing even in the darkest hours. Suddenly, a voice broke through the tension. Young Sophie, a girl of only 12, stepped into the circle of vulnerability, her heart unencumbered by adult biases. "He just needs to talk," she said emphatically, naive in the ways of the world, yet wise beyond her years. Her words, so simple yet profound, shattered the adult constructs that often complicate and confuse. As if needing permission, Jacob's vulnerability soared. He finally felt seen. In this essential moment, a juxtaposition of raw honesty versus protective authority, the onlookers found themselves standing at a precipice. Would they choose to illuminate the path of empathy, or retreat into shadows where discomfort lurked? The gravity of the choices looming before them was thick like fog. It suffocated any remnants of easy assumptions. The clock ticked, each second pulsing under the weight of unresolved fear. Jacob looked at Clara, Elaine, Robert, and even the officers. Hope flickered in his eyes again. What would the adults decide? Would they protect him, foster that bond that had just begun to glow, or would they retreat into the realm of bureaucracy and protocol, possibly unraveling everything they had just stitched together? As conversations began to swirl, intertwining the hopes of the crowd with the responsibilities of authority, you could feel the emotional core of the experience boiling just beneath the surface, threatening to stream over in a rush. It was all unfolding in real time, the stakes mounting as they navigated the complexity of childhood trauma, interwoven with societal norms. But just as clarity seemed within reach, an unexpected turn of heart hung in the balance, like the last lingering rays of daylight before the night descended. It became clear that the impending decision could either cultivate a garden of healing or plunge them all back into the darkness that had momentarily lifted. The future teetered dangerously, on a knife's edge, leaving not only Jacob's fate uncertain, but beckoning the question: are we brave enough to protect the innocence that remains within us? The scene shimmered with the unspoken promise that something beautiful and transformative was on the verge of manifesting. Yet the outcome hung suspended, waiting for one more courageous voice to break through the cacophony of systemic expectation. What would happen next? Would the fleeting moment of connection be enough to inspire action, or would it fade into the silence of societal indifference? The answers lingered just beyond reach, waiting for a spark to ignite the possibilities still hidden in the shadows. The rabbit, witnessing everything, hopped away silently, but it left behind whispers that would echo long after the last tear had fallen. What would you do if you stumbled upon a crying child abandoned on the roadside? Would you echo empathy or let indifference guide your actions? This is the question that hangs heavy on the air in our story today. One that begins in an ordinary town but spirals into an extraordinary revelation of what it truly means to bear witness to suffering. On a seemingly idyllic afternoon, as the sun kissed the horizon, a small town hummed with the joys of life. Laughter floated like sweet melodies from backyards. Children frolicked in the warm glow of summer, blissfully unaware of the darkness creeping just beyond their periphery. But on a quiet stretch of asphalt, amidst the shadows of those carefree moments, a boy named Jacob sat alone on the roadside, tears streaking down his dirt-stained cheeks, a sight that struck a chilling contrast against the sunlit backdrop. A rabbit, its twitching nose and quivering ears attuned to the world around it, paused just a few feet from Jacob. With its innocent gaze locked onto the boy, it bore witness to a moment of unfiltered despair. How ironic is it that nature often knows the pulse of our humanity better than we do? In this fleeting instance, the rabbit emerged as an unexpected harbinger of connection. But would it be enough to interrupt the cycle of indifference that so often governs our interactions with suffering? As cars sped past, drivers glanced but quickly reverted their focus to the road ahead, embodying the bystander effect, a phenomenon that reveals how the presence of others can inhibit an individual's capacity to take action. Strange, isn't it? In a world teeming with people, why do we so often fail to engage when faced with another's pain? Perhaps the societal conditioning of fear, embarrassment, or even apathy casts a shadow over compassion, rendering us reluctant to pierce the veil of discomfort. But then, into this poignant tableau, a woman named Clara pulled over. She wasn't exceptional by her own claims, just an ordinary woman returning from a trip to the grocery store. But in that moment, she felt something primal stir within her, a fierce urge to act. Stepping out of her car, Clara faced the boy with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "Hey there, sweetie," she called gently. As Jacob lifted his tear-soaked face, the gravity of his situation began to unfold. His voice trembled, laden with the weight of his confession, a potent reminder that children often bear the brunt of adult conflicts, their innocence caught in the crossfire. Clara knelt beside him, grounding the moment in shared humanity. Here was the turning point, the moment when fear morphed into the potential for healing. Clara became the embodiment of empathy, a force so compelling that it transcended the chasm of societal expectation. Scientific research has shown that empathy activates the brain's reward centers, triggering dopamine release and fostering a sense of connection. In choosing to engage, Clara was not just comforting a child. She was sculpting a sanctuary of compassion amid an unforgiving landscape. As she spoke softly to Jacob, a community began to materialize around them. One by one, onlookers emerged, drawn into the web of compassion like moths to a flame. A woman named Elaine approached with a snack, a small offering, but steeped in profound significance. She asked, her eyes radiating warmth and understanding. In that single gesture, Elaine summoned the essence of human connection. Sharing food is one of the most ancient symbols of companionship. It's a ritual that transcends cultures. Studies suggest that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can create ripples of positive emotions, underscoring that showing compassion often begets compassion in return. Jacob hesitated for just a moment, then accepted the chocolate, a sliver of sweetness cutting through the clouds of despair that had gathered in his heart. But even as the atmosphere shifted from one of despair to burgeoning hope, the questions hung heavy in the air. Where was Jacob's family? Why was he alone? The fear of returning home loomed like a specter at the edge of his mind. Clara's reassurances offered solace, yet the unease clung to him, whispering reminders of the chaos he'd escaped. And then, from the periphery, Robert, a man known for his gruff exterior, stepped forward. He'd kept himself distant from the community, but felt something stir inside him, an instinct to protect. "I know what it's like to be scared," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. His words reverberated through the group, evoking memories of grief and loneliness. They were witness to something deeper, the recognition of shared pain among strangers, a testimony to the strength found in vulnerability. There's a psychological theory known as social proof, which suggests that people look to others to determine how to act in ambiguous situations. Here, the cycle of fear began to unravel. ignited by those willing to lean into discomfort. In front of them stood not just a boy, but a collective tapestry of hidden emotions, each person intertwined by their past experiences and present actions. As Jacob felt the warmth of their concern, it was almost as if he could see the threads connecting them all, a stark reminder that humanity is built on these moments of connection amid chaos. But just as hope blossomed, the sharp wail of sirens punctured the fabric of that moment, echoing ominously in the distance. The dazzling blue lights of approaching police cars marched steadily closer, causing the atmosphere to shift abruptly once more. Anxiety rippled through the crowd. Would their burgeoning bond be severed? Would they shrink back into the safety of silence and compliance, allowing authority to sweep Jacob away? The officers emerged from their vehicles, their faces a mix of stern professionalism and genuine concern. In the world of child welfare, cops are often the gatekeepers, authority figures tasked with making decisions that can profoundly impact lives. With every step they took, the air grew heavier, the stakes exponentially raised. Would they listen to the storm of emotions swirling around them, or would they reduce Jacob's entire experience to a policy? One officer inquired, glancing around at the gathering crowd. Clara stepped forward, taking a breath to steady herself. "He just needs support. He ran away from home," she explained. The vulnerability hanging in the air felt electric, almost palpable. Jacob's heart beat wildly in his chest. Would they understand? Or would they interpret his tears and fears as just another case to resolve, shoving him back into the chaos he had escaped? As the officers exchanged glances, grappling with their duty versus the humanity unraveling before them, Clara sensed the rising tension. "He's scared," she said with urgency, her voice rising above the murmur of the crowd. But how often do we consider what it means to truly listen? In our rush to assist, we often overlook the power of validation, the acknowledgement of a person's fears and pains, essential to fostering trust and connection. In this critical moment, what was needed was more than just words. It was the willingness to hold space for Jacob's truth. And then, against the murmurings of authority, Sophie, the young girl who had earlier spoken up, piped in with a clarity that seemed to cut through the tension. "Let him talk. He just wants to be heard," she urged, her small frame vibrating with conviction. Her youthful honesty served as a clarion call, transcending the fear and doubt that held others captive. The adults around her shifted uncomfortably, each wrestling with their inner conflicts, yet Sophie's unwavering spirit radiated a hope that was impossible to ignore. It's extraordinary how children often possess an innate ability to cut through complexity with radical honesty, and in that moment she forged a path for Jacob, daring everyone around her to engage sincerely. As the officers listened, Jacob took a breath, slowly gathering his thoughts. "I don't want to go home," he whispered, the vulnerability of his admission resonating within the hearts of those gathered. He began to unravel his feelings, each word a fragile thread weaving to form an intricate narrative of fear. The silence that ensued was loaded with acknowledgement, an understanding glimmering within each person standing close enough to hear. In this unique scaffolding of connection and empathy, they were witnessing something transformative, a delicate resilience unfurling in real time. But as Jacob poured his heart out, the decisions hung heavy in the air, thicker than the humid afternoon. The officers, still wrestling with their roles, began to question what it meant to truly protect this boy. The community huddled close, their breath held tightly. The moment of truth was at hand, teetering on the precipice of a transformation. Would Jacob be swept away by the looming authority, pushed back into the very environment he had tried to escape? Or would his newfound strength, ignited by the warmth of compassion surrounding him, be enough to guide his journey towards safety and understanding? As the vibrant hues of twilight began to cloak the sky, there was a palpable tension in the air, a contest between fear and hope, lingering on the tip of everyone's tongue. Jacob's fate was intertwined with not just his own courage, but the collective willingness of those around him to ensure the bonds they had forged wouldn't easily unravel. The stakes grew higher, the lights flashing against the darkening scene, a swirling convergence of emotions and choices now heightened and ready to unravel. What would happen next in this delicate dance of humanity? The answer hung just beyond their grasp, shrouded in uncertainty, waiting for the next courageous voice to emerge from the crowd. As each moment ticked away, the air grew electric, setting the stage for a revelation that would shock everyone involved. What if I told you that the simple act of witnessing suffering could unravel the threads that bind us together as a community? Imagine a moment so raw and impactful that it reshapes destinies. Picture a rabbit, innocent and curious, spotting a boy, all alone on the roadside, his tears carving tracks down his dirt-streaked cheeks. In that fleeting second, everything shifts, and what happens next will leave you questioning the very essence of compassion in our world. On a deceptively perfect afternoon in a quaint, sun-drenched town, life appeared blissfully normal. Children laughed and played in yards bathed in golden light. Parents waved from their porches, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the sweet aroma of blooming flowers. But somewhere just off the road, a chilling contrast emerged. A young boy named Jacob sat desolate, swallowed by hopelessness. As this rabbit frolicked nearby, oblivious to the boy's pain. It paused, perhaps sensing the weight of despair hanging in the air like a heavy fog. It isn't often that nature becomes a witness to the fragility of human emotions, but there it stood momentarily, a sentinel of innocence amid chaos. How easily we overlook moments like this in our daily lives, where fleeting glances become routine and compassion fades into the background. Social psychology sheds light on this dilemma through a phenomenon known as the bystander effect, which asserts that when surrounded by onlookers, individuals often assume someone else will step in to help. Disturbingly, this can lead to paralysis, a shared burden of inaction that festers in our society. As vehicles zipped past with alarming indifference, a woman named Clara decided she could not let this moment slip through the cracks. She noticed Jacob's small form crumpled on the asphalt, his tiny shoulders heaving in sobs. A fierce sense of urgency sparked within her. Without hesitation, she parked her car and stepped into the scene, where the cacophony of daily life churned on, untouched by the boy's pain. "Hey there, little one," Clara said, her voice imbued with a warmth that cut through the layers of sorrow surrounding Jacob. His dialogue began as a whisper, laced with fear. The confession tumbled from his lips like a stone, heavy and weighed down by a torrent of emotions. In that moment, as Clara knelt beside him, the world outside faded. The chatter from passing cars diffused into an echoing silence, and for the first time, Jacob was truly seen. The journey toward understanding can be fraught with complexity, yet Clara's simple question unlocked something within Jacob. Empathy, at its core, creates a bridge. Research shows that when someone genuinely listens, it activates those fragile areas of the brain connected to our sense of connection, allowing both parties to reflect on their own experiences. Clara wasn't merely providing comfort, she was engaging with a deeper understanding of human connection. But even as she tried to console him, Jacob's vulnerability teetered on the edge of fear. Would he be forced to return home? Would he find himself engulfed once more in the chaos that had driven him away? As whispers of collective concern began to ripple through the gathering crowd, Clara sensed the unspoken fears that hung in the air like a looming thundercloud. As if drawn by an invisible thread, others began to congregate, emboldened by Clara's courage. A woman named Elaine approached carrying a chocolate bar, an offering of solace wrapped in bright packaging. She asked gently, her eyes sparkling with warmth and sincerity. To an outsider, it might seem trivial, a mere snack on a summer's day. But in these fragile moments, simple gestures often hold great significance. Sharing food has a remarkable way of solidifying connections. For hundreds of years, across cultures, the act of breaking bread together has served as a symbol of unity, a silent acknowledgement of our shared humanity. Jacob accepted the bar, and as he took a bite, the sweetness enveloped him momentarily like a hug. It was a taste of solace, a reminder of kindness amidst suffering. Yet even as his expression lightly brightened, shadows of uncertainty loomed. "I just don't want to go back," Jacob confessed again, each word laden with desperation that poured from the depths of his young heart. The collective breath of the crowd stirred as they processed his fear. immediately transformed into a chorus of empathy and solidarity. In the back, Robert, a usually reserved man known for his reticence, could feel the stirrings of unacknowledged feelings. He had spent years keeping his emotional distance. Yet here was an opportunity to break down that barrier. "I know what it's like to be scared," he said, stepping out from the shadows of anonymity. His rough voice carried an unexpected tenderness, lending strength to Jacob's fragile hopes. This exchange wasn't merely an act of kindness, it was a reflection of shared histories, fragile pieces woven into the fabric of humanity. There's a psychological concept known as social proof, which suggests that individuals look to others for cues on how to act in uncertain situations. With each word exchanged, the atmosphere thickened, binding the group together, illuminating a path where compassion prevails over indifference. But just as a fragile sense of connection began to bloom, the sound of sirens sliced through the air, startling everyone present. Frantic blue lights appeared in the distance, a stark reminder that the world outside their moment of bonding was far less forgiving. An unsettling tension rippled through the crowd. Would Jacob be whisked away by police, returned to the very chaos he sought to escape? As officers emerged from their vehicles, the scene morphed into something far heavier. The looming authority brought questions that resonated within each heart, crafting an emotionally charged atmosphere where human connection faced the threat of the system. Would they be able to grasp the complex emotions woven into Jacob's situation? Or would they be ensnared by protocols designed to ensure safety, but which often disregard vulnerability? The lead officer approached calmly, his demeanor professional yet considerate. He asked, glancing toward Clara with scrutiny. Jacob's heart raced as Clara leaned closer, asserting, "He needs help. He's scared." With every word she fought for him, not just as a child in distress, but as a human deserving of love and understanding. The crowd held its breath, the tension palpable. This was more than just a moment. It was a microcosm of society's struggles with empathy, fear, and the quest for understanding. In this vital moment, the officer's response could redefine what it meant to connect with a child in crisis. Would they see beyond the uniform and protocol to acknowledge Jacob's fragile spirit? The atmosphere thickened even more as the officers exchanged glances. Could they approach this tiny, vulnerable life with the same compassion that had illuminated the hearts of those gathered? As they weighed their options, Jacob saw the doubt etched on their faces. It mirrored his own fear. What would happen next? Caught in the throes of uncertainty, he glanced toward the budding connection around him. Clara, Elaine, Robert, all of them standing resolute in their compassion. And somewhere deep within, he felt a flicker of courage ignited by their presence, a whisper urging him to speak his truth. "Please, I just want someone to listen," he implored, each word swelling from the depths of his heart. It was an ask that transcended words, a symbolic plea for understanding and validation. In that moment, Sophie, a young girl observing from the sidelines, stepped forward. Her voice cut through the silence, a beacon of unwavering innocence. "He just needs to talk," she shouted, her enthusiasm surging, infecting the crowd with her youthful wisdom. Sometimes it takes a child's voice, unencumbered by adult fears and expectations, to remind us what really matters: connection. In the wake of Sophie's rallying cry, the officers finally took notice. Their hardened expressions softened, acknowledging the power of vulnerability tangled in the air. But as Jacob's truth hung suspended in the air, the emotional stakes rose to an almost unbearable height. Would they be able to recognize the humanity behind his words? Would the fear of protocol overshadow the moral obligation to engage with compassion? As moments ticked away, the scene morphed into a poignant reminder of society's collective responsibility towards the vulnerable. Could they resist the temptation to revert back to indifference, to procedural norms? Would they rise to the occasion, fostering an environment where healing could take place? And as the twilight continued to deepen, coloring the sky in hues of purple and indigo, you could feel the tension shift. The situation teetered on the brink of revelation, where the boundaries of courage and fear danced in perfect harmony, waiting to unfold. What would happen next as Jacob poured his heart out, surrounded by a community of support? Would they adhere to the call of the moment and guide him toward understanding? Or would fear taint their actions, unraveling the connections that had just begun to take root? The answers loom like stars just beyond the horizon, waiting, fumbling, as the shadows of uncertainty stretched long before them. The rabbit watched from the sidelines, observing this powerful interplay of emotions, a silent witness to the unfolding narrative, one that would demand introspection and insight from every single person present. The stage was set for a transformation, and the questions remaining hung in the air, ripe for resolution. What would it take to empower Jacob in this decisive moment, and would the collective heart of the community have the strength to intervene? What if I told you that a simple encounter could redefine our understanding of empathy? Picture this: a rabbit, innocent and oblivious, pauses to notice something extraordinary. A young boy, abandoned and weeping on the side of a quiet road. In that single moment, everything changes. What happens next will challenge your views on human compassion and the interconnectedness of our lives. The scene unfolds in an unassuming town, where the sun bathes the streets in warmth. Children play, laughter ringing out like music. But beyond the laughter, beneath the facade of tranquility, sits Jacob, an 8-year-old boy whose world has crumbled around him. His back pressed against the hard asphalt, knees drawn up, he is a picture of sorrow that seems incongruent with the jubilant atmosphere surrounding him. As fate would have it, a small rabbit scurries across the road, halting momentarily to take in the sight of Jacob. Those big, curious eyes are filled with untainted innocence, perhaps sensing the gravity of Jacob's despair. The presence of this rabbit symbolically asks the viewer, why do we so often turn a blind eye to suffering? It's remarkable how nature can reflect our humanity back to us, reminding us of the raw, untamed emotions that linger beneath our polished facades. Cars speed by, drivers offering only fleeting glances, their faces etched with indifference as they retreat into their own realities. It's a stark representation of the bystander effect, a psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to offer help in emergencies when others are present. It's as if the collective presence of onlookers breeds a discomfort that silences individual action. But amid this sea of indifference, a single figure emerges: Clara. Clara, an everyday hero masked in the skin of an ordinary woman, pulls over her car, heart racing at the sight of the lone figure so engulfed in sorrow. With every heartbeat, she steels herself. The urge to intervene outweighs the discomfort of uncertainty. "Hey there, sweetie," she calls softly, kneeling so that her eyes meet his. Jacob, his small form trembling, struggles to collect his thoughts. I ran away," he murmurs, his soft voice barely rising above the whisper of the wind. Those words, laden with the weight of his turbulent emotions, hang in the air like a storm cloud, casting a shadow over the moment. In a heartbeat, Clara becomes the anchor, her compassion transforming the bleakness of the situation into a space of hope. Empathy acts like a balm in moments of distress. Studies have shown that connecting genuinely with someone else activates the same areas of the brain involved in experiencing pain. Clara wasn't just comforting Jacob, she was engaging in a profound act of emotional psychology, laying the groundwork for healing. As her voice wraps around him, Jacob feels the world outside beginning to fade. The busy street, the noise of life, they dissolve into silence, creating a sacred space where vulnerability can flourish. It's a moment echoed throughout psychology, where the simplest act of kindness can ignite resilience. Nearby, a ripple of voices emerges. Others are drawn in, pulled toward the emotional gravity of the scene. A woman named Elaine, known for her volunteer work around town, approaches. The offering is simple, but its intent speaks volumes. Food has long been a conduit of human connection. Its sharing transcends cultural boundaries, fostering a sense of belonging and compassion. Jacob hesitates, but as he takes the chocolate, a flicker of warmth momentarily brightens his tear-stained face. In those precious moments, the chocolate acts more than just a snack. It symbolizes care, a break in his sorrow, and a temporary reprieve from fear. The act of kindness plants a seed of hope, reminding Jacob that not all is lost, even in his darkest hour. But the serenity of this budding connection is fragile. Jacob's sorrow still lurks, intertwined with fear. The ghosts of his home, filled with arguments and chaos, haunt him, pulling him back toward the memories he desperately wants to escape. As the group of onlookers begins to grow, Robert, a usually aloof man known for his distance, steps forward. He feels an echo of his childhood in Jacob's pain and can no longer refrain from engaging. "I know what it's like to be scared," he says, kneeling beside them. His voice is gruff yet gentle, infused with authentic understanding. Vulnerability can be contagious. The empathetic response of one person can inspire others to follow suit. Robert's admission is a poignant reminder that shared experiences can build unbreakable bonds, creating spaces where healing can flourish. Empathy, as revealed in psychological studies, has the power to spark deep emotional connections, helping us to navigate life's profound complexities. It's a thread that weaves us all together, even if we are strangers. As the group coalesces around Jacob, a sense of solidarity fills the air. A shared commitment to his well-being emerges, slowly but surely altering the dynamics of the moment. Yet just as hope begins to blossom, it shatters against the harsh edge of reality. The piercing wail of sirens approaches, slicing through the fragile atmosphere like a knife, pulling the community back to a realm of serious implications. The blue lights flash in the distance, and an unsettling tension ripples through the crowd. Would this newfound connection dissolve before their eyes? As police cars pull up, the crowd shifts. The presence of authority looms, their sirens echoing a reminder that the complexities of child welfare can often blur lines between protection and regulation. Jacob's heart races as he clings to Clara's reassurance. Would they understand? Would they recognize the delicate threads of connection being woven around him? Or would they revert to protocol, shoving him back into a world he was so desperate to leave behind? The officers exit their vehicles, exuding professionalism mixed with compassion, their eyes scanning the scene. One officer inquires, assessing the gathering with skepticism. The community stands united, but Jacob feels the tension curl in his stomach. Clara steps forward, unwavering and resolute. "He needs support. He's scared," she explains, her voice steady yet infused with the urgency of the moment. Would they perceive the emotions held within Jacob's fragile frame? Would they decipher his tears and fears as a cry for connection rather than just another case to be handled? As the officers exchange glances, the weight of their decisions looms larger than life. When faced with vulnerability, we often find ourselves wrestling against the rigid constraints of our roles: police officer, social worker, bystander. But what if, in moments like this, the greatest act of authority could be demonstrating compassion? One of the officers asks gently, bending down to Jacob's eye level. Jacob feels as if the world around him is suspended in time, a moment filled with possibilities and uncertainty. Sweat beads on his forehead, and he swallows hard. "I don't want to go home," he murmurs, each word an admission of fear layered atop fear. The collective breath held in the crowd resonates, a symphony of empathy and apprehension, as they bear witness to this critical juncture. In this heavy silence, Sophie, the same young girl who had earlier called for attention, cuts through. She shouts, her voice unwavering. A child's perspective often holds insight that adults might overlook. A reminder that the most essential forms of connection come from understanding rather than authority. Educators and psychologists often emphasize the importance of active listening, being fully present for someone else's experience without the intent to fix or direct. Sophie's declaration resonates deeply, urging everyone present to engage and honor Jacob's truth. But the gravity of the moment remains thick, charged with the question: will the officers retreat into the safety of their duties, or will they gather the courage needed to nurture this moment of connection? It teeters on the precipice of vulnerability, with the potential for profound change hanging in the balance. As the sky begins to darken, the air tinged with possibility, time slows. The scene becomes a canvas where human struggles collide. The very essence of compassion and authority exists in beautiful tension. Will Jacob's plea for understanding spark a collective ripple of response amid doubts and fear? What happens next?
Will they ignite a path forward through courage and kindness, or will they succumb to policies that risk pushing Jacob back into a life of turmoil? The answer hangs tantalizingly close, poised to unveil a truth that will shock everyone involved, a moment where compassion has the power to reshape destinies. The rabbit, once a mere spectator, now holds the essence of this tale, poised to remind each participant of the innocence that exists in connection. As the story unfolds, the trembling threads of humanity wrap around them all, signaling that perhaps, just perhaps, there is hope in the act of witnessing, in the choice made to engage. There's much more to this story waiting to be revealed, and it beckons us to venture further into the depths of what it truly means to care.